Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down something pretty important, the complex systems that make sure every single medicine you take is both safe and effective.
So how can you really be sure about that pill? Well, it all comes down to an incredibly rigorous system of checks and balances. And it has to be rigorous, right? The whole thing is designed to prevent errors that could be, well, literally life-threatening.
Without these strict controls, the risks are just huge. We're talking about things like unexpected contamination of the products, or getting the wrong label on a container, or maybe even worse, the medicine having way too much or too little of the active ingredient, maybe even none at all. So yeah, the stakes are incredibly high, ranging from a treatment that just doesn't work to something that causes serious harm.
To understand how the industry manages these huge risks, we're going to walk through the core principles that govern how drugs are made. We'll start with the big picture philosophy, and then dive deep into the nitty-gritty details. Okay, let's dive right in. The entire system is built on this one foundational concept. It's known as good manufacturing practice, or GMP for short. This is the absolute bedrock of quality.
So where do these rules come from? Well, in Europe, they're all laid out in a series of documents called Udrelex. You can think of it as the official rulebook for anyone who's manufacturing drugs.
And here's the key thing about GMP. It isn't just about testing the final pill to see if it's okay. It's a whole system that builds quality into every single step of the manufacturing process. You can't just inspect for quality at the end. You have to design and build it in from the very start.
And a huge part of GMP, really the core of it, is proving that everything works exactly like it's supposed to. This whole process of providing documented evidence is called qualification and validation. It's so critical that a key document, Annex 15, is dedicated entirely to it.
So you can imagine, this is a massive undertaking, right? Proving everything works? How on earth do companies organize all of this? Well, they start with a master plan.
This document is called the Validation Master Plan, or VMP, and it is the high-level playbook. It's the central guide that defines a company's entire approach to validation for a whole manufacturing site.
And what's really interesting here is just how much this VMP covers. It lays out the big picture validation policy for sure, but it also gets into the weeds, defining who's responsible for what. It covers all the facilities and equipment. It has procedures for something called change control, which is super important for managing any little tweak to the process. It even maps out the strategy for requalification to make sure everything is still working perfectly years down the line.
Okay, so that's the high-level blueprint. But to make this real, let's follow a single piece of equipment on its journey, right from the initial concept all the way to day-to-day operation, and see how this all plays out.
And this journey follows a very clear, very logical sequence of steps. You can't just skip ahead. Each stage builds on the one before it, making sure that absolutely nothing is left to chance.
Everything kicks off with the URS, the User Requirements Specification, and honestly, it's pretty much a wish list. It's where you define exactly what you need the equipment to do, both from a user's perspective and, crucially, from a quality and safety perspective.
Next up is DQ, or Design Qualification. This is where you check the blueprints. You verify that the proposed design is actually suitable and that it follows all the GMP rules. It's a critical check to make sure the design meets all those requirements from the URS before they even start building the thing.
Okay, so the machine is built and it arrives on site. Now we hit IQ, or Installation Qualification. This is all about getting documented proof that the equipment is installed perfectly. And I mean perfectly. We're talking checking it against the drawings, making sure every single component is there, that all the instruments are calibrated, and even verifying the materials used are correct. Everything gets checked off. Then comes OQ, Operational Qualification. Now we get to turn it on. This is where you test that the equipment performs exactly like it's supposed to across all its operating ranges. And this isn't just about normal conditions. You push it to its limits, testing what they call worst-case conditions to make sure it works no matter what. And finally, we get to PQ, or Performance Qualification. This is the last step, and it's all about providing that final, documented proof that the equipment, now working as part of the whole process, can consistently produce a quality product. You're actually making the real product now, proving it works batch after batch.
All right, so we've meticulously qualified a single machine. That's one piece of the puzzle. Now let's zoom out and look at how companies validate the entire recipe, the whole manufacturing process.
So, Process validation is basically the documented evidence that the process, when you operate it within its set parameters, can perform effectively and reproducibly. It proves you can make a product that meets all its specifications every single time. Now, there are a couple of ways to tackle this. The traditional approach is where you typically make a set number of batches, often 3, just to confirm that your process is reproducible. But there's also a more modern way called continuous process verification. This is where you're constantly monitoring and evaluating the process's performance. It's often used for products that were developed with a really deep scientific understanding, a concept known as quality by design. But no matter which approach you use, the goal is always the same: to maintain a state of control throughout the entire life cycle of the product. This isn't a one-and-done thing. It's a continuous process of verification.
So, what's the core principle here? It's really this commitment to the entire life cycle. You plan and define everything up front with your VMP and your URS. You execute and verify at every single stage, IQ, OQ, PQ. Then you validate the entire process. And finally, you monitor it continuously to make sure it stays in that state of control. It's a complete end-to-end system. This whole systematic framework has been the bedrock of pharmaceutical quality for decades. It's the reason we can trust our medicine. But it does leave you with a big question, especially as medicine gets more and more personalized and manufacturing gets way more complex. How will these fundamental principles of validation need to adapt to make sure we can still have that same trust in the medicines of tomorrow?